Anna, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to the HelloPrenup podcast.
So excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you about all things dating and relationships. I'm always fascinated about what makes a relationship work versus why some of them implode.
I know, and I feel like you have a lot of really good intel too, doing what you do professionally, of hearing people like the reasons of getting divorced, relationships not working out.
Well, I see the other side of it.
And I do as well, because I talk to a lot of divorced people as well. So it's interesting I feel like we have probably a lot of interesting facts to share.
Totally. We have a lot to talk about. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I started matchmaking about 7 years ago. I moved from San Francisco to New York, and I realized that the dating culture in those two different cities was complete polar opposite.
Okay.
And a lot of that is because San Francisco actually has more college-educated men than women. And New York is the opposite. There's more college-educated women than men.
Okay.
And that's how the dating culture really is defined by. When there's less, high-quality women, the men treat the women really well. They are, gentlemen. They do all the things. So San Francisco, I just remember guys being so amazing there. And I came to New York, and I realized, I had so many beautiful girlfriends that were smart and intelligent, and all these, had cool jobs, but they had these, loser boyfriends. Could not understand how they would let these guys treat them, poorly. And it was kind of the opposite, where women were a dime a dozen. And I was like, no, we got to change this. And it's all with, how you think of yourself and how you behave in relationships. And ultimately, I always tell people, look around your friends that are married. They're usually the ones that have a lot of kind of self-confidence, self-assurance. They're not the ones chasing people that don't want them, that really know what their lives look like and found someone that complements that, rather than always chasing the 6'3", hot, tall guy.
This is fascinating.
I have a lot of thoughts on the topic.
I'm trying to figure out where to start. So tell us how you got into this.
So I was just literally lecturing friends all the time, and I wrote a little dating rules book for some friends. And I had a couple of my really close friends that I kind of introduced them to their husbands by accident, but also I was just someone that was always really outgoing. And if I met someone that I thought my friend should meet, I would literally grab them and be like, "You're meeting my friend, it's your future wife." And I had a few friends that got married from me doing that. And I realized this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I love.
Yeah.
And I was working in advertising, and I got laid off from my 9-to-5 job. And that same day I got laid off, I was like, no, I want to work in the dating industry. And I was actually dating someone at the time who I called him when I got laid off. He's like, "What are you going to do?" I was like, "Yeah, I already have recruiters calling me, trying to offer me triple the money, but I think I want to go into the dating industry." Yeah. And he was like, "You are such an idiot. You're not going to make it. I thought you had your shit together, but you are just like one of those girls who wants to live off a guy," all these things, and broke up with me over it. And I was like, no, I'm going to prove him wrong. But also this was I knew I could do it. And that was in 2017. Time goes by fast.
Are you in a relationship?
I am. Yeah, my boyfriend, I have a funny story. And I think I told you, a prenup is part of the reason why we met.
Ooh, I want to hear this one.
Yeah, he, the first time I met him was 8.5 years ago on Craigslist.
Tell us more.
Yeah, I was buying a Coachella ticket, and he was the only one that offered it to me face value. And so we met in person. I thought, cute guy, whatever. But he was very, serious, all business. So, nothing happened then. And I found out later that he was actually engaged at the time. And he was like, "Yeah, I want a prenup, and, whatever we earned before is ours. We earned together. We split." I thought it made a lot of sense. But she had a relative that worked I don't know if she was a divorce attorney, or she worked something in the industry where she was like, "No, what about this scenario? What about that scenario?" Ended up costing him thousands of dollars of these crazy scenarios that would probably never happen. What if she gets cancer? And it's he's like, "I don't know." And it got too much, and then he ended up ending the relationship. So I'm grateful.
Wow. A prenup really is the reason that you met your boyfriend.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it was really funny. I didn't mention that to you. I was like, wait, I got to tell her this. But yeah, so thankfully. But I know a lot of people that kind of get hung up in that prenup stage. And I tell people, if you think about it, you get a prenup, whatever state you marry in, they decide the laws of what happens when you guys split, if you guys split up. So you might as well have it kind of outlined to whatever makes sense for you beforehand. Like I was never scared of prenups. Like people that think, oh my gosh, that means that we're going to get divorced. They're already thinking at the end. I don't think that's necessarily true, but either way, I'm grateful for them.
Yeah, I'm always harping on the idea that if you don't have a prenup, you still have a prenup because your state's going to decide for you.
Exactly.
But let's back it up to the beginning of the relationship, right? So even those friends that you were setting up years back when you first started, how do you decide what will make a good couple? Like, what are the personality traits at play that make sense for two people?
Yeah, I honestly think that whatever you are, whoever you are, like whatever's important to you, how you live life, how you want to live life, your goals, your values, like you want someone that mirrors that. So whatever it could be, you want someone that complements where you're at. I think some people date more aspirationally. And, I noticed that if you are really insecure about something, you project that on the people that you want to meet. So I have male clients that are a little bit overweight maybe, or could want to lose, like 10, 15 pounds. They want the skinniest woman that they can find because that proves that they're not really that bad if they can get a woman like this, So it's like this weird psychological thing that I see people do. So I think if you're really like honest about who you are, what you're looking for, what your life will look like, you'll find someone that complements that. So with my friends that I set up, you just kind of feel energy sometimes. Like I was like, okay, like this, like one of my best friends, I met her husband to be, now they're married with 3 kids. But I met him at a bodega and he was kind of making fun of me. And I turn around, and I see this guy and we just instantly started talking. And I realized like, oh, like he could be one in our friend group. Like he could really be like one of us. Yeah. And, my girlfriend at the time, she's like, oh, I really want to date a guy like this, and this. And he really fit a lot of the things that she mentioned. And so I told him to go home, put on his best outfit. He's coming to a party tonight. He's going to meet his future wife. So maybe I put the idea in his head or something. I don't know.
What makes a couple compatible, though? What are those, or are there specific personality traits that routinely work?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's honestly really understanding yourself and what you want from life and what your life looks like. Like the clients that I have in matchmaking that don't really end up with anyone, either through me or dating on their own, is they don't really have strong preferences or they don't really know what they want. They're, they say like, yes, I want to get married, I want to have kids, but you have to make some sacrifices in that, like, are you willing to live in the suburbs next to her family? Are you willing to, not travel, 3 months out of the year or whatever? It's easy to say you want something, but if you are not showing it with your actions, then, I see that a lot. But I think, I just think it's understanding what you want in your life and finding someone that complements that. So it really could be anything. I always tell people like, what is your soul connection to someone that you're going to have? And it doesn't have to be, religious per se, or it can be, but like if you're someone that's really passionate about helping people and you work in nonprofits, like you're going to be soul connected to people that also have that same mission in life. And I think it's really beautiful when you can share that with someone. And it can look in different ways, but to have that like long-term relationship, I think there is some kind of commonality of, what like feeds your soul and that you find that in someone else.
Core values are everything, I think, in a relationship. And just from experience, I think oftentimes the specific interests can differ, but as long as your values are the same, and at the end of the day, like, do you want the same things in life? Do you both want to have the white picket fence in the suburbs? Do you want to travel the world? Like, are your life goals aligned? And sometimes that can be tough. I can imagine as a matchmaker, it can be kind of tough to discern what someone's real values are because oftentimes people themselves are not sure.
Exactly, especially if you're dating with the intention of finding the hottest person you're ever going to get with. That's not dating from a value-based place. And I have some clients that I notice, like they say, I want someone who's this religion, I want someone who's going to be a good mother, and da-da-da. But then they go for these women that are very clearly not aligned with that. And so, like, of course, you need to be attracted to someone, but you have to, like, kind of get over that at some point where, yes, like, there's maybe millions of more beautiful people that you could end up with, or hotter or taller or more fit or whatever. But at some point, like, you have to meet someone that you can just be completely bored with. You're at the airport, the plane is delayed 6 hours, and you're not like dying of boredom. You're actually having fun with the person you're with because you're with your person. That's what I always tell people to think about, like, who can you like really be bored with? And I think that's why in COVID, so many divorces happen because a lot of marriages, like mom's out working all day, so is dad. They only see each other on the weekends here and there. There's so many activities for the kids. Like they don't actually spend quality alone time together. And I think when couples are forced to do that, they realized, oh, we actually have nothing in common.
What are some of the personality traits that you see work in relationships? And what are some that don't consistently?
What I really see is as people get older, they tend to be more rigid in what they're looking for. And I think you just have to have a flexibility when it comes to dating and definitely to a marriage. And if you are like, I wake up at 5 a.m., I go to the gym, this is my schedule, I do not, vary from this ever, and you want to meet someone that fits exactly your schedule, like that's really not realistic. Yeah. Maybe you can meet someone that comes close, but you have to have flexibility. And I've had clients that, I set them up with someone that was great. And one client, after like 4 or 5 dates with someone, he goes, she likes to go to bed really early, like at 9 p.m. And that's just like not my lifestyle. And I just don't think I can't compromise from that, and broke up with her. And I was like, well, if you probably talked to her, like maybe you guys could meet in the middle a little bit, or you could have figured it out. But he was like, no, I like to go to bed at this time. It's not going to work. And that's it, and broke it off over something of a, bedtime.
It's so easy to search for perfection these days too, because when you think about how dating works now, it's like you go on an app. Mm-hmm. For the most part, you go on an app and it's like shopping. You're like, I want someone who's this tall, who has this eye color, who, has this type of job. And it almost takes the human element out of it. And, we're kind of commoditizing people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I see a lot from both men and women, actually, that there's a strong feeling of feeling rejected again and again and again. And, I had so many friends. And when I was on the apps too, I remember like I would be chatting with someone I was really excited about, and all of a sudden they unmatched me. I'm like, what the hell? Like, what did I do? And I realized, oh, they're a catfish, or they actually have a girlfriend or something. Like, it's really never anything personal typically. But I think that's a big part of it, that can kind of really mess with you and make you feel like there's something wrong with you. And also, I don't think it's natural for us to have like 20 different conversations going with 20 different people. Because I do think sometimes the quantity dilutes the quality. Yeah. And if you have so many people that you're talking to and your energy is kind of everywhere, then you don't really have an opportunity to think about who's actually a good fit for you and just kind of focus on maybe 1 or 2 people, But I mean, I remember on my app days, I'd have so many different like matches and likes, and I'd be like, oh, I'm bored on a Tuesday, let's go on a date. I wasn't really dating with intention. I realized I probably hurt people along the way because I was doing that. Or I'd be chatting with people because I was bored, but then they asked to meet, I'd be like, oh, no, I don't want to meet.
So if you're on these apps, how can you tell someone's intention? How do you know if they're dating for sport or they're serious about a relationship?
That's a really good question. I think one thing I always say is a big red flag is if you're talking to someone on an app and the conversation turns like sexual or anything that makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. I think women experience that a lot. That person does not have good intentions. If he's trying to like sext with you or like all that kind of stuff, like he's a stranger. Do not do that. I think another red flag to look for is if you're chatting for days and days, weeks, and he's not set up a plan to meet, he's just bored. He's a time waster. I think within 2 or 3 days, there should be a plan to meet.
Yeah, that's another question. That comes up a lot. I have friends who are on dating apps, and it's like they chat for, a day, 2 days, and then nothing. Mm-hmm. And I'm always the one saying like, okay, if he doesn't ask you out by like, I don't know, message 14, it's time to move on. But that's an arbitrary number. Do you agree with that? Like, you're just wasting your time.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 days, there's no plan being made. Yeah. And he's either biding his time because there's someone else that he's dating, or it could be, lots of different reasons, or literally they're just bored. They just want attention.
Is it okay for people to date multiple people at the same time off of dating websites? Because I feel like that's pretty common and it's in some ways just expected. But does that harm the likelihood of finding a real relationship?
I don't personally love it because, listen, I think if you go on a date with someone and then you have like a date planned with someone else, 4 or 5 days later, like I think that's totally fine. But to get to 3, 4, or 5 dates with multiple people in the same time frame, I do like the same thing, like the quantity diluting the quality.
It also sounds like a full-time job.
Sounds like a full-time job. Another thing is I realized, when I was dating, a lot of these dates are around alcohol. And I'd have like 2 or 3 drinks. And I'd get to like a third, fourth date with someone. I'm like, I don't actually like them. I just like drinking with them. I'm having fun because there's cocktails. Of course, I'm going to have a good time. Yeah. And so that's the other thing too. I think, there's a lot of alcohol around dating a lot of different people, texting. And, I don't think that's good energy if you're really looking for something serious. Because I really believe like whatever energy you put out, you get back. So if you're putting out this energy, dating lots of people, I think serious, drinks, fun, you're going to meet people that are matching that. And if you want to meet someone who's kind of more serious and looking for a long-term relationship, they're going to get turned off by that energy.
So really diving in to the dates, how do you assess someone's intentions on a date? Like, do you just go out and ask them, what are you looking for? How do you get, I'm assuming that we're talking about from the perspective of someone who's looking for a long-term relationship. And oftentimes, where I'm coming from is oftentimes the complaints from friends of mine are like, well, he said he wanted a long-term relationship, but then like he's doing the opposite, right? He's dating multiple people, or he's not responding, he's not checking in with me. And, I just wonder if there's a way from that very first date, how to assess what that person's really in it for.
He might want that serious relationship, but just not with you. That's the part that hurts to hear.
Yep.
He might be looking for it, but it's just not going to be you for whatever reason. But I think I think even like what's more important is after the first date. Yeah. So on a first date, they can say like, yes, I'm looking for this. I grew up like this, whatever. But, like with my boyfriend, after our first date, the next night he called me on the phone and we chatted for like an hour. That's how I know, like, oh, this guy is serious and he's serious about me. Like, that's what I was like, oh. So I think it's more important is how they show up after that first date, because people can say whatever and they're not necessarily maybe lying, maybe they are, but they might not see it with you. They could still be saying like, this is what I'm looking for. It still might not be you, but the actions they show afterwards, I think is way more important. And I've had friends tell me the craziest stories of, going to the bathroom on a date. They come back, they see their date on Hinge or whatever.
Oh no.
Swiping while they're, they come up behind and they can see it.
Oh no.
Yeah, like things like that. Like that guy, not it.
Not it.
That's a red flag.
Not it. What is the ideal first date?
That's a good question. I think it really kind of depends on what you're into and what you want to do on the date. Like I usually do something simple on first dates when I set them up for clients. Like a wine bar or something, like where you can have a drink and like loosen up a little bit, somewhere that's still quiet, you can hear each other. But what I tell people too is if you're a little introverted, or if your dates feel a little monotonous where it's like an interview and same thing every time, bring something to the date that you can share, like backgammon or cards, and you can play a game and you can do something that kind of get out of this like interview type thing if you're feeling like dating fatigue, which I definitely felt the years I was dating on the apps. Every date felt like exactly the same. But if there's something we could play, like a little game or something, like it made it fun again. And I'm like, all right, I'm having fun with this person. And it kind of, I don't know, made it a little less boring.
Is dating different for someone who's out of a divorce and maybe looking for a second marriage?
Yeah, I think it's so funny. People coming out of a divorce, their mindset is very different. And it's a lot of times, like maybe they are open to getting remarried, having a long-term relationship, but I think you do need like a period where you're just dating again. Because I have so many friends that missed the whole dating app time of when they met the person they ended up marrying. Yeah. So they had never been on a dating app before. They don't know anything about it. And it's kind of like a kid in a candy store. And I think that's fine. Like, as long as your intentions and you're not telling people like, oh yeah, I want something serious, but you're actually looking just to kind of have fun. I think if you're just honest about where you're at. But I tell people, and I actually had 2 or 3 different men tell me this, that as men come out of a divorce, they need a couple of years of like, after the divorce is final, kind of date, whatever, do the rebound thing to really be ready for their next like serious relationship. And like they need that time to, I don't know, figure themselves out, do the therapy, whatever it is they need to do. Yeah. Because I know so many friends that are dating these guys are separated, not really divorced yet. Sometimes they still live with their ex-wives.
I say this all the time. I'm like, men have to go from one relationship to another. I've seen so many men, they're getting divorced and they're already in another relationship to the point where they want to get married before the NICI period is complete. The NICI period, at least in Massachusetts, in every state it's different, is a period that you cannot get remarried in. So it's like either, let's call it 90 days. And so I've had so many clients when I was practicing as a divorce attorney who would be like, when can I get remarried? They weren't even totally divorced yet.
I know, it's crazy. I see that a lot, but I do think, and sometimes I'm sure the person they marry right after, they end up staying married to, and I'm sure it's fine. But I personally don't want to be someone's rebound. And I always tell friends, like, let them have their time, figure their, whatever out. I mean, I've had friends that have had the most nightmare stories of ex-wives wanting to make their ex-husbands' lives a living hell, and they're part of that. And yeah, it doesn't sound fun.
That doesn't sound fun.
I'm like, bring the ex-wife to me, I'll set her up.
Yeah. So how do clients find you?
I usually only work on referral base. It's such a personal relationship working with a matchmaking client. I get to know everything about their lives, that I only want to work with people that I feel like I have a good connection to, and like we have good energy. When I was working at the matchmaking companies before I did my own thing, they would send you clients, and some of them were just not nice people, or made me feel like scared to look at my phone if I saw a text from them. Like, I never wanted to feel like that ever again. So now I only work with clients that are just very gracious, like super connectors themselves. Like, I love with my clients, want to help me with my other clients. I'm like, do you know any men, in this age range in Miami or whatever? And
that was my next question. Is that how you find them a partner? Is it through those connections?
Sometimes. But all matchmakers, we heavily recruit depending on whatever the client's looking for.
How do you recruit?
So, I mean, it depends what they want. Like, I had one client, he is super into like fitness, and he's done like Ironmans and all that stuff. And he really wanted to be with a woman who also was either like worked in the fitness industry or something along those lines. So I went to a million yoga classes and tried different studios. And I would just tell, the manager, like, I'm a matchmaker, if there's anyone that you can send my way. So I did that way. So in person, going to events or wherever the target audience is, just physically put myself there. And then also online, Instagram is amazing for us millennials. That's where most of my kind of followers, audience is. And I'll post there that I'm looking for, people, age range, location, any other kind of specifics. And I'll get so many DMs from friends of friends. And I like to feel like I have some kind of connection to whoever I'm setting up with a client, whether it's a friend of a friend or even like 3 degrees separation. At least they come from some trusted source than a total stranger from the internet. There's a lot of tricks that we do in the matchmaking world to find people.
I was going to say, how do you know if people are legit? Like, do you have to do a background check? How do you know they're real people?
Well, that's why I like to at least have some kind of connection to them, someone vouching for them. But I don't do background checks, but there are different services that I've used that you can check if someone has like criminal records or, marriage certificates or bankruptcies, things like that. Addresses, like all that kind of stuff. So I do some kind of check to make sure that there's nothing, wonky in their background. And then also, all women, we're like private detectives online.
Yeah.
Like
we are.
I've learned a lot over the years that I've been doing this professionally. I had one client once that I actually reached out to him to sign up with a female client, and he's like, well, I want to hire you. Let's go to lunch and you can tell me about what you do. And I was like, okay. And he was like, early 50s. And I was mid-30s at the time. And I remember sitting there feeling like,
am I on a date?
Yeah, it felt a little uncomfortable. I don't want to say uncomfortable, but I could tell he was kind of coming on to me a little bit. And at the end of the lunch, he goes, so what if I want to date you? And I'm like, I'm not available, but I have clients way better, or I'll find you women way better than me, haha. And then I was like, this guy just feels like something's off. And I was telling a girlfriend about him, and she does this thing where she puts a guy's first name and last name and the word allegations into a Google search to see if anything comes up. And sure enough, something came up.
Wow.
So
that is...
Yeah. So she's good. Yeah. Women are just...
That is some brilliant detective work.
Yes. Yeah. So if you meet someone new, just put their first, last name, allegations, see if anything comes up, and that will tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. There are some Facebook groups.
Oh, yeah.
A friend of mine is, again, she's on the scene, and there's a Facebook group, Are We Dating the Same Guy? And she was about to go on a date with this guy, and she was talking with him on one of the apps. And then she just went into this group, and I think she must have typed in his name. I don't know how she found it, but there was a post about him. And there were some really horrible things written by multiple women in that post. And it's kind of crazy because, like, you know, you don't know if what's true or what's not, but it's also like, it's really great that she found that before she went on a date with this guy, because it sounds pretty scary.
I know my friend did the same thing recently. She had like a phone call with someone from one of the dating apps, and they talked for like 40, 45 minutes, and she got weird vibes too. Like, he kept saying, we can get a hotel room because now
that's a no.
I left my place in New York because I have lawyers that I'm working with to buy this company. I don't know, like this crazy story.
Weird.
And he's like, yeah, we're getting a hotel room. She's like, why would I get a hotel room with you? I don't know you. And he just like really kept insisting on this hotel room. And then she looked him up in that, are we dating the same guy? And I mean, like hundreds of women had bad experiences with him.
Wow.
And when she showed me a photo, I was like, you know, I kind of remember reading about him too. Like, I remember he has a lot of people. I've only posted on there once about a guy, and it was only because he was so horrible. We were on a date, and I told him I had like dinner with a client later, but I could do happy hour. And he's like, great. And so we meet for like some wine at like 6 or something. And I told him, I was like, all right, well, I can't drink too much. I'm meeting a client later. He's like, well, I only order bottles because, you know, wine from a glass is just, no, it's not good enough. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then the check comes, and I always, you know, offer to pay always on a first date. And he was like, no. And I made a joke. I was like, well, I only insist on paying if I have no interest in seeing the guy ever again. Like, haha. And I was, so, you know, because
what a great line.
And so at that point, like, I thought he was fine. I would have gone out with him again. And then he insisted on getting one more drink, because I still had about like 45 minutes to kill. So I went to another bar, and I was waiting in line for the bathroom, and I come back and he has another bottle ordered. I was like, what the hell? And I was like, well, that's too much wine. Like, I have to meet a client. And he's like, well, I told you I don't order by the glass. Like, he yelled at me. I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay.
That's
and then
disturbing.
and then he's like, I counted how long you were waiting for the bathroom. It was a really long time. I was like, what? I was on my phone texting with my client to see like what time we're meeting. He's like, no, I saw people go in the bathroom after you and leave before you, and like grilling me about that. And I was like, okay, this guy's a weirdo. And I was like, all right, well, I gotta go. Like, do you want me to pay for this wine? He's like, no, just go.
Controlling behavior.
And then
it gets worse.
It gets worse. We never exchanged numbers, but on the app, he messaged me, you know, he's like, oh, I hope you have a good dinner with your client. You know, would love to see you again. I don't respond. The next morning, I get another message from him. How did it go? So let me know when I can take you out again. And I was like, listen, I feel like we're probably not aligned. I do remember you yelling at me a few times, but I wish you the best, you know, no hard feelings. And so then I get a Venmo request.
No.
For the wine. And I ignored it because I was like, this guy's a weirdo. And then I got a second one, and it said, like, the caption or whatever was, come on, let's be adults about this. We already talked about this. Because remember, I mentioned that I'd pay if I had no intention of seeing him again. And I was like, this guy is crazy. I had to block him on everything. So I was like, I'm just going to post him on there to see if anyone else had similar experiences. At least 12 girls responded. All got Venmo requests.
I'm speechless.
I know. That made me feel so much better. I was like, all right, it wasn't just me, at least.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay. If you really need the $40 or whatever, I'll send it to you, I guess.
Well, on that note, let's pretend that the date was going well. If you went on a first date and it's going great and you're getting along really well, who's supposed to pay?
I think that's up to the people, but I think it's always polite to offer as a woman. Whether or not the guy accepts it or not, then you can decide if he does accept it, if that meets your standards, and if it doesn't, then at least you'll know, like, all right, this guy's letting me pay. I want to.
Do you like do the pull out the wallet move? Like,
yeah,
do you
I'll even go as far as getting a credit card out. I want to see how far I can take it.
Okay.
Until they're like, no. For me, you know, I think on a first date, I think it's nice if a guy pays. That being said, if we're on this crazy first date, and like the first date with my boyfriend, like he paid for the first like drinks that we did. And then we ended up going to a concert, and I got around there. Because I was like, all right, at this point, like we've been out for a while.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I know he appreciated. Like he thought that was really sweet.
Yeah.
And it's not about the money for me. I think, you know, like we don't really live in the 50s anymore where men are expected to be the provider, pay for everything while you still get to be a feminist. Like I don't think that that's the world that we just don't live in that world anymore. That being said, I think on a first date, if a man asks a woman to do something to go out, like, I think he should pay. I do think he should pay. That being said, if you ask, as a woman, if you ask a guy to do something, then I think you should probably cover that too. Like, I think that we can kind of go both ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a tricky one because some women feel very entitled to like a dinner date from an app. Because I have a couple of male clients where they're very wealthy and they kind of lead with their money.
Yeah.
And so they keep meeting women that want them for their money. And it's like, all right, well, let's not lead with the money anymore.
Right.
Let's, try something different. Like you're meeting these women from dating apps. Like this is not through me, but through a dating app, you don't know this person. You don't really owe them anything.
Yeah.
And I told one client, I was like, why don't you try offering a coffee date and just see how they react? Mm-hmm. If they are like pissed off about it, like then they probably don't have the best intentions, right? So he did this experiment and wow, like he would get berated by these women, like how I would do not put on makeup for anything less than dinner and da 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 da, like going off at him. And I was like, wow, you just saved a lot of time and money. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I'm not saying you should test people, but if you're someone that, like you've been burned by, people taking advantage of you, then stop doing that.
Yeah. And how do you, when you're setting up a couple, how do you ensure that both of their intentions are pure, especially when there's some type of wealth disparity?
Yeah, I think that with matchmaking, at least, people understand it's a more serious dating experience, that someone has, committed to, working with a matchmaker. They put money into this, their emotions, their energy. Yeah. So I think most people respect that process. So that being said, I mean, I never set up these like fancy dinner dates and stuff for first dates. I always do like a wine bar. I like try to keep it like pretty easy, low key, but still like romantic. I think sometimes like daytime dates it's easy to say like, oh, there's no chemistry. Yeah. And I want my clients to have like the best possible chance to have like a second date. Yeah. But that being said, like I have a girlfriend, she really only does 8 a.m. walks with her dog for dates.
8 a.m.?
Yes. And she was like, if I can like you at 8 a.m. and we can just go to Central Park, have coffees, hang out with the dog, she's like, then I'll go to dinner with you. She's like, I don't want this guy spending all this money on me. It's too much pressure. I just want to see, can we hang out and like each other at 8 a.m.? This is what life will look like.
It's a different approach.
And it's a different approach, but it kind of works for her. So I think everyone has different, ways that they can date to kind of figure out what's going to work for them. But like I said, like I think alcohol doesn't need to play a huge part in dating. Mm-hmm. A drink or two is like okay if it's over a course of like, hours. But yeah, like I said, like I was getting the third dates with guys, I knew nothing about them.
When should people who are dating, who are not necessarily a couple yet, start talking about the more serious stuff, about what they're looking for in life? Because I assume that you get to like date 2 or 3 and now you're really interested in this person, but how do you know that you want to go on date 4?
Yeah, I do think before even going on a first date, you should pre-qualify people. Like if you really want a family and having a kid in the next couple of years is something that's really important to you, then you need to make sure that the person that you're meeting is on the same page. Yeah. Like those are things that you're not going to change your mind about probably, and they probably won't either.
And do you do that pre-qualifying for your clients?
So for matchmaking, yes. I do a whole screening for anyone I'd set up with a client, so I'll know exactly where they stand on like religion, politics, kids, like all the big things. So that way they can just go on the date and like see if they have fun. Yeah. But if you're meeting someone from like an app or even through a friend, have your pre-qualifying questions. And those are things that are like very important to you, value-based things. If you know that you want to do church every Sunday and that you want your partner to be a part of that, you need to be upfront about that. Yeah. Things that are just not going to change for you, where you're like, this is just how I want to live. Then you should know that stuff before the first date. Yeah. And then I think, dates like 1, 2, 3, you want to know like how do they grow up? What was their, family dynamic like? Because a lot of that will give you a lot of hints of, like if they had an amazing time growing up in the suburbs and they loved that and they want to do that. Like they'll say like, I can't wait to do that for my children one day and give them this house, in, Westchester, wherever they grew up. As you ask them how they grew up and what their family was like, they'll naturally start telling you like real, feelings about that.
Because I feel like sometimes reveal themselves.
Yeah. Because I feel like sometimes if you ask someone like, do you see yourself living in the suburbs? They could say like, maybe, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it. But then if you ask them like, what was growing up in the suburbs like for you? As they start talking about it, you'll hear from them that they actually loved it, or maybe they didn't like it so much. But date 4, 5, 6, I mean, those you really are, I think at that point, like you're kind of in. Like, you know, if you get to date 5, 6 with someone, like you should feel like you know them pretty well. I don't know. I think a lot of it though is if you know the stuff beforehand, you can just enjoy yourself on those first couple months of dating. Like they should be the most fun part of the dating process. You don't want it to be always so serious and asking serious questions and yeah.
So I have to ask the obvious question. When do you bring up the prenup?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as you start talking about like, you know, I see you as being my person, and that, you know, you see us going to marriage, I think you just ask someone like, have you had anyone in your life that has had a prenup when they got married? And you just kind of hear how their experience or their friends' experience was or family members. And maybe you'll kind of get more of a honest answer how they feel about it. Because if they say like, you know, like they had a family member that went through a prenup process and was absolutely horrible and they would never want to do that. Or maybe like that saved their friend's marriage or, you know, or when they end up getting divorced, it made things a lot easier. Yeah, I think you would ask them what their experience with it was. So they know if they have anyone in their lives that have gone through the prenup process and then kind of start there. And I don't know, I feel like there's so many podcasts or so many things you can kind of listen to. And so I kind of be like, hey, I just listened to this podcast. Give it a listen, see what you think.
I always say the best time to chat about the prenup is third date, second glass of wine. I stole that from Kevin O'Leary. I don't know if that's actually true because I think it really depends on what stage in life you're at. So if you're in your 20s, my take on talking about the serious things on date 3, it's going to be a little bit different, right? You're exploring relationships. You're still learning about who you are as a person. But I think when you're in your 30s, you're more serious. And especially if you've been through a divorce and you're, you know, looking for a second marriage, you're more serious. You're not dating for sport. And in that phase of life, how do you, from a matchmaker's perspective, how do you decipher whether or not you're financially compatible?
That's a big thing that a lot of divorced women tell me, that they want to be with someone who makes as much money as they do, at least, if not more. I think people have gone through divorce, you know, they are a little bit more burned when it comes to money because they probably spent a lot of money on divorce lawyers and, you know, splitting assets and stuff. So they're definitely burned. I think you can see how someone lives and get an idea of where they are financially. But I think as you get more serious with someone, you kind of need to know where they stand. Yeah. I mean, I think within 3 months, I kind of knew where my boyfriend was financially, and I had a really good idea.
Did you talk about it?
Yeah, we did. You know, I started revealing more as I revealed more about where I'm at financially and how my business is doing. He was able to feel comfortable to reveal more to me as well. Because, you know, I think it's funny how people feel so awkward talking about money when we talk about literally anything else. Yeah. But money, for some reason, is the last thing that feels taboo for some reason, or like there's some shame around it. Yeah. You know, I had a friend, she was terrified to tell her now husband, but at the time boyfriend, that she was in a little bit of debt and she was working through it and she was almost done, but she didn't feel comfortable, you know, moving forward to engagement. And if he didn't know, like, she did have a little bit of debt and she'd have some money troubles in the past. Yeah. And, you know, once she told him, she felt so much better and now they're married and everything's fine. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of shame around that. So I don't know. I always feel like when you start being open and revealing more, the other person feels comfortable too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of shame around the opposite problem too, which is having inherited wealth. And I have seen couples where one party is hiding the fact that they're a beneficiary of a trust and they're receiving distributions to the tune of, you know, a couple $1 million a year. And they don't want the person they're dating to know that. And I think in either case, whether you're hiding debt or you're hiding assets, if you get to the point where you are only revealing this information on your financial schedule in your prenup, it's too late because now you're creating this kind of mistrust in the relationship. Because the other party is thinking to themselves, well, why didn't you tell me this? You know, if it's that one big thing, why didn't we talk about it? But I think it's really common for people to feel uncomfortable in the dating process when it comes to money.
Yeah, because I always told friends, like the guys that's really showy with money, that's trying to, you know, wearing this watch and trying to take you all these nice dinners, like that does not mean he actually has the money. He could be totally putting this on for show.
You can't trust that.
Can't trust it. Do not be blinded by that.
Yeah.
And if anything, I would rather be with someone who's really good at saving money than spending it.
Yeah.
Because I definitely know people that have gotten in pickles being with people like that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine not trusting my partner so much to not reveal something as big as like, this is how I'm living financially. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. That's a total mistrust in the person. And maybe it's a bigger problem in the relationship.
Yeah.
Or in yourself, or when you go to therapy because you feel like, well, people only like you for your money or something.
That's exactly it. I think in that specific case, I think that person needed to work through why they felt they needed to hide that information. Mm-hmm. And I do think at the end of the day, it was they felt like people were always using them. Mm-hmm. But it's also really sad if you're in a relationship and you're not revealing that information because you are afraid your partner would be using you. I mean, hopefully by the time you get engaged, you know your partner well enough to know they wouldn't use you just for money.
I mean, I think before getting engaged, you really got to see all the accounts.
Yeah.
Because like that's was always my biggest fear, is that I'd end up with someone that had a lot of debt or something, or had some skeletons, financial skeletons in the closet. I think you got to be really transparent about that. Or so even like moving in, I live with my boyfriend now. Like we had to kind of figure out, okay, like are we going to do like a joint account and we're going to take out the money for cruise? Like that's stuff like they're difficult conversations. But I think, you know, if you both want the relationship to work and trust each other, then you'll figure it out.
I had a friend who was dating someone, and he actually was paying child support, and she didn't even know he had a child. And it's like, I think there are certain people who they want to lie. Mm-hmm. And it's important in the dating process to understand how to pick up on that kind of behavior, right? Like, are there things they're hiding? Like, and oftentimes you just have to trust your gut. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, most people want to be honest. They're just afraid. When it comes to budgeting, you're talking about how, you know, are you opening a joint account? Are you paying expenses from this joint account? At what point do people have a conversation about paying bills together once they move in together? Is there a right way to do that?
I mean, I don't think I even did it the right way, but I think it should happen before you move in together even. So you're kind of starting it off, you know, on the right foot. And then obviously, like you might pick one method and that might not work for you guys, and you transition to something else. But yeah, I mean, you realize once you live with someone that you might live completely different ways on certain things. Even like, you know, like do you put everything in the dishwasher? Do you wash things by hand? Do you, you know, like all that kind of stuff. Figuring out like how someone lives, how you live, and how you can blend that together. And I've been figuring that out currently. But yeah, we always talked about it before we moved in, of how we would handle it. And I thought that was good. But then we didn't actually follow through on that until like a month after living together. Yeah. And I think, you know, we were just kind of caught up of like getting everything in and kind of figuring it out. And of course, there's a little tension. It's like, I feel like I'm paying for everything. He feels like he's paying for everything. So we had to figure out how we both don't feel that way. Yeah. And something that kind of makes sense. Right? So we did do the joint account. And now I feel like that makes a lot more sense. And we both are putting an equal amount in there and taking out what's, you know, communal. And I feel like that's the most fair. And hopefully that will keep working for us.
That's what most couples do, is they have separate accounts. Even in their prenups, they'll keep everything separate. That is premarital. Any appreciation on premarital assets or property will be separate during the course of the marriage. And they keep a joint account, and they're really intentional about how they use that joint account. So oftentimes it will be a percentage of their income goes into the account, or they'll say a set amount per month, or even just enough to cover expenses. And they'll move money around in a way that allows them to, again, be really intentional about that joint money to pay for joint expenses, or if they want to save for a down payment for a house together. So it completely makes sense to me, and I think is a really nice way to move forward and ensure you feel like you're in this together financially.
Exactly. It's funny because I talk to a lot of women, and they still have this idea in their heads that they're going to marry this guy and it's going to solve all their financial problems. He's going to pay for everything, and they can just, you know, live the good life. Yeah. And I'm like, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
That's not how most successful couples live.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, you have more data on that than I do, but I feel like most couples, they split things and, both are contributing parties to the relationship.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like I have friends that are 40, 41, they're still thinking they're going to marry this white knight and they can never work again and they're just going to live a great life. And I'm like, I don't think that's realistic.
How do you handle unrealistic expectations with clients?
I'm still figuring it out because honestly, it's tough. It's tough when someone sees reality one way and to tell someone like your reality is wrong. Like that's a really difficult conversation to have. I had one female client, as we're working together, her preferences kept changing. Yeah. And she was like, I only want you to send me unicorns. I don't want to go out with anyone that's not a unicorn from you.
What does that mean?
And she was sending me leads of guys that she'd be interested in meeting. And they were like 6'3", hot, tall, tech founders that are like dating Victoria's Secret models. I'm like, this is not realistic. Yeah. And, and she was like, well, on my own, I'm dating guys that are, a little bit different. And I was like, well, show me who you're going out with. And it was like bald, short, like, And I was like, oh, okay. So you are open to, there's some flexibility here. She's like, well, from you, I only want this one type. I can get this on my own. I was like, okay, well, that's not realistic. Like, if you work with a matchmaker, whoever you could potentially end up with on your own, the matchmaker is just going to provide more of those kind of people, more opportunities to meet people that we're not like magicians where all of a sudden you're going to get like someone you never had access to before. And I feel like that's a common misconception with working with matchmakers. But yeah, like I don't know. I think it's funny with the female thinking of like, I'm going to marry someone that's going to save me. Yeah. And I think the second you realize like you really, even if you're married, it's not guaranteed forever. Like you really need to depend on yourself. And financial freedom is really important because I've seen women, stay in things too long because they didn't have that financial freedom. Or they felt financial insecurity, so they don't actually present themselves the best way in dating. Mm-hmm. If you're like, if there's something that's really like you're covering up or you're not confident about, I think on dates like that does come out. Yeah. I even had one male client on a date. Afterwards, I asked her for feedback, and she was like, yeah, it sounds like his company is folding. He's not doing well financially. I asked him, I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I had a bad day at work. I was like, she's thinking that you're about to lose your whole business, that you have to like, move in with your parents. Like you had a bad day at work. That's not her job is not to like, be the recipient of your bad day. And, I was like, you're doing just fine. One bad, like your company is not going to fold. And he was like, oh, okay. Like you can't, like you can't project that on dates because people are going to think like, oh gosh, who's this person? Yeah.
It feels like your job is 50% psychology, 50% dating strategy.
Yeah, there's a little bit of hand-holding. Yeah. But I started my business really on the idea of creating a safe place for people to date in, for women to not be, scammed online. Like I actually got scammed by someone that I matched with on Hinge. And I had a friend that met a guy at a coffee shop. And after a couple of dates, she noticed one of her credit cards was missing. And he lied straight to her face, and they saw on CCTV that it was him using her card. And it's like you just never know who you're going to meet out there. So I wanted to create a place where people are vetted as much as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. And then for men, my male clients, like I'm so protective over them because I don't want them to meet women that are going to take advantage of them, that don't have good intentions. So I do the best I can.
For those who are already in a relationship, what are your top 3 pieces of advice for a happy long-term relationship and maybe marriage?
Yeah, I mean, I do, I'm like you do too. I talk to a lot of divorced people, a lot of people that have been in relationships, good and bad. Mm-hmm. I think from like the women's side, I think they want to just be appreciated. For healthy relationships, what I've seen is, women really want to be appreciated. Just like little things that women do around the house, like men probably don't even notice. Having the towels look nice, having like little decorations, like there's
putting the seat down.
Yeah, there's just like there's little things that men can just notice and appreciate. I think is nice. I when I hear women that are divorced, and honestly, like this is not a secret, but you have to keep sleeping with your partner. Yeah. And everyone that all the divorcees I've spoken to, their intimacy just completely dwindled towards the end, especially if there's kids involved. I hear a lot from the male side how the women love their kids way more than their husband. And then the husband just kind of feel like, I'm just here to providing the money. Yeah. So I think men need to feel the appreciation on their end too. I think it's really important to make sure the relationship feels really strong. And not let that, dwindle just because there's like kids involved or busy working or whatever. And I think it's really nice to like have shared activities. If there's something that you really enjoy doing with your partner, like playing tennis or going on walks or playing different board games or whatever, just having something that's like the thing that you guys do, and maybe do it like every week, have something you guys do, like the two of you, something fun, I think is important. I think a lot of relationships can feel like they're not fun after a while. It just kind of feels like, all right, we're just trying to keep this family together any way we can. So I think you just have to try to, have fun every week. And I don't know. I'll let you know once I get married.
When you get married, you're going to get a prenup?
I think so. I mean, I told you. Well, it's funny because I think my boyfriend's like maybe a little scarred from the whole prenup thing. But I'm sure we will. Because I'd rather us decide what our, marriage will look like and, God forbid, divorce, rather than letting the state decide. So, yeah, I'm very open to it.
When you are matching up clients, do they ever have questions about the prenup conversation? Like, this is something that's important to me. Do you vet for that? Is that even part of the conversation?
Yeah, some of my wealthier clients, they definitely will have a prenup involved in whoever they end up with. Yeah. And I think from like day one, that's assumed, and like that is just out there. Like, I don't think they are hiding it by any means. I think, and I think for most women, if you're going to date a man who owns a company, or, employs a lot of people, especially like, they have to keep that separate, from their personal lives. So you should assume there should be a prenup, I think, in that kind of situation. But yeah, I think my wealthier clients for sure are pretty open about it because they're like, this is the situation. This is, the work I'm in. There's a lot of people that could suffer if there isn't a prenup involved, especially if they've already had kids. They want to make sure, that their kids with the first marriage are taken care of and, nothing will get, in the way of that. But yeah, maybe I think you might have converted me. I think maybe date 3, just start talking about it.
Date 3, second glass of wine.
Why not? Just put it out there.
How do you feel about age gap relationships?
Yeah, I feel like I talked about this on my Instagram. There's a lot of comments on it. But that I'll hear women that, maybe are 35 that want to date someone's 35, and they'll see that guy dating a 25-year-old, and they'll be like, what do they even talk about? And that could be with any kind of ages, but that's just an example. And I think a lot of it is what I hear from my male clients is they like to date younger because when they're at the office or they're working and it's stressful and they come home, they just want to relax and chill and kind of like keep things a little bit surface level. Yeah. And like they don't need to debate when they get home. So like what do they talk about? Like they talk about nice things, like they're just kind of getting that warmth and comfort, and they don't really want to be in a relationship where it feels competitive and someone's going to be challenging them too much. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, like I do notice that a lot of the women I speak to, like, well, I have my MBA, I have my law degree, I have this, I have that. And it's like, well, men aren't necessarily dating for your accomplishments, professionally. Really, they want something that's the intangible. It's a feeling of being like loved and cared for. I had a male friend. He told me, he's like, why does a guy get down on one knee for a woman? He doesn't need her for sex. He can get that anywhere. He doesn't need her for food. He can make his own food. He can get whatever. He doesn't need her for money. He can make his own money. He needs her for love and support. It's like that. He had this example, and I thought it was a pretty funny example, but he's a gym guy, so it makes sense. He's like, if she has my protein shake ready for me, she knows I'm going to the gym, and I like to have my shake at the gym, and it's sitting on the counter, and she says, have a great workout, babe. He's like, that's the woman I want to marry. When she like sees your needs and just like, gives you that little bit of like support that you're not going to get anywhere else. Like he's like, that's what I would get down on a knee for. So
what about for the ambitious woman? What is she looking for?
For the ambitious woman, I do think there's like a yin and yang in relationships. And a lot of the women that are, high powered CEOs or doing really well financially, they want someone at that same level. But realistically, I think they might do better with someone that's like totally not in the same field, maybe in a creative field, where someone that's gonna have more time. If you're gonna be working crazy hours and traveling a lot and you're dating someone the exact same kind of schedule, you might never see each other.
Yeah.
But if you're dating someone or married to someone who's like a furniture designer and does well on their own and maybe owns their business, but it's, you know, they don't travel as much and they're not working as crazy hours, and they're working something completely different, I think it'd be more of like that supporting role. That's a really compatible match. Yeah. And I don't know why women have in their heads like they need to be with someone that makes more money than them, even if they're making a shit ton of money. Like you don't necessarily need that. Yeah. I think it's keeping them single, honestly.
Anna, for anybody who wants to use your services or read more about you or find you on social, where can they find you?
My website is annamorgenstern.com. My Instagram, Anna Morgenstern. A lot of information's on me there. And then, yeah, if you want to work with me, just send me an email.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. This was awesome.
It was fun. Thank you.